The sun had just begun to set behind the tall mountains, casting long shadows across the ranch. The air was dry and crisp, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the smell of fresh hay mixed with dust. The ranch was a large one, with a stone house at its heart, surrounded by fields stretching as far as the eye could see. This was Jake Cutter's world, a place where he worked from dawn to dusk and where peace was hard to find but always treasured when it came. Jake Cutter was a man of few words. He'd lived a hard life, spent most of it on horseback or working the land. His hands were rough from years of labor, and his face was weathered by the sun. At 32, he wasn't a young man anymore, but the scars of his past had only made him stronger. He didn't mind being alone. Most of his life was spent on his ranch, away from the bustle of the town nearby. That suited him just fine. He had no time for the gossip and drama of the world outside his land. But things had changed since Sarah Mae Thornton arrived. She came into town one cool autumn morning, the sound of her boots echoing on the wood of the town's dusty streets. Sarah was a stranger to everyone, and yet there was something about her that made people look twice. She was a beautiful woman, no doubt. Her long brown hair flowed behind her like a river, and her eyes, though often shadowed by some deep sorrow, shone with an intensity that caught Jake's attention. Sarah wasn't like the other women in town. She kept to herself mostly, never speaking much about her past. She took a job working at Jake's ranch as a cook and housekeeper, and that's how their paths first crossed. Jake had hired her after hearing from a friend in town that she was skilled in the kitchen. It was a practical decision. His ranch had grown and he needed someone to help manage the house. But like all things in the Wild West, nothing was ever just practical. From the moment Sarah started working at the ranch, something about her troubled Jake. She was quiet, too quiet sometimes, and there was an air about her that made him think there was more to her than what she showed. She did her work well, but when the evening came and the ranch house grew quiet, Jake would find her sitting alone in the dim light, her eyes distant as if she were lost in thoughts of something far away. It was on one such evening that things began to change. Jake had been out in the field all day, moving cattle from one pasture to another, and he'd come back tired, his body aching from the work. He didn't expect much when he returned to the house, just a quiet dinner and some time to rest. But as soon as he walked through the door, he knew something was wrong. The kitchen was silent, the smell of food lingering in the air, but there was no sign of Sarah. He called out her name but got no reply. Frowning, he stepped into the main room, and that's when he saw her. She was sitting by the window, staring outside into the growing darkness. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly, and she seemed so lost in her thoughts that she didn't even notice him standing there. "Sarah?" Jake called softly, his voice hesitant. It wasn't like him to worry about anyone, but there was something about her that pulled at him. She blinked as if waking from a deep sleep and looked up at him. Her eyes were full of fear of something she couldn't control, something that haunted her. "I'm not clean anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake took a step forward, unsure of what she meant. "What are you talking about?" She stood up abruptly, her face filled with panic. "I have to leave," she said quickly. "I can't stay here anymore. I can't be here. I thought I could start over, but I was wrong." Jake felt his heart tighten. He had no idea what was going on, but he could see the desperation in her eyes. This wasn't like her at all. Sarah had always been quiet, but she had never seemed afraid before. "Sarah, what's going on?" Jake asked, his voice more insistent now. "Tell me what's wrong." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Her eyes darted around the room as though she were looking for something, anything to help her escape. Then slowly, she sank down onto a chair by the fire, burying her face in her hands. "I can't stay," she repeated softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I'm not clean anymore. I'm not who you think I am." Jake stood there, his mind racing. What did she mean by that? Was there something in her past she was running from? He had heard whispers in town. There were always rumors about strangers, but nothing concrete. The town wasn't big and people talked, but Jake wasn't the kind of man to judge others based on gossip. Still, the unease in Sarah's voice sent a chill down his spine. He moved closer, trying to offer comfort, though he didn't know how. "Sarah, you can't leave. You're safe here. You don't have to go anywhere." She looked up at him, her eyes wild with fear. "You don't understand," she said urgently. "I've done things, terrible things, things I can't take back. If you knew, you'd never look at me the same way again. I'm not clean anymore. Her voice broke and she couldn't continue. The tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she covered her face, crying softly. Jake felt a pang in his chest. This wasn't just fear, it was the weight of a past she could never escape. Jake had been through hardships. He had seen enough in his life to know that people weren't always as they seemed. But he also knew that everyone had a past, things they regretted, things they wished they could change. And it was clear that Sarah was carrying a burden too heavy for her to bear alone. He took a step forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Sarah, you don't have to tell me everything, but whatever it is, you don't have to go through it alone. You've got a place here, a safe place. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. You don't know what I've done, she whispered again, her voice filled with shame. Jake was about to say something when he noticed something odd. On the table beside her was a cloth, folded neatly as though she had placed it there on purpose. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed important. He reached out and picked it up. As he unwrapped the cloth, his hands froze. Inside, wrapped carefully in the fabric, was a small bandana. But it wasn't just any bandana, it was stained with blood. Jake's heart skipped a beat. The blood was still fresh, dark against the fabric. He stared at it for a long moment, unsure of what it meant. His mind raced back to the rumors he had heard in town. There had been talk of a woman escaping from an outlaw gang, rumors of violence, of someone who had been forced to do things she could never forget. Could Sarah have been that woman? He looked back at Sarah, who was still sitting in the chair, her eyes wide with fear. She had seen the bandana and her face went pale. It's not what you think, she whispered, shaking her head. I never meant for any of this to happen. Jake's heart sank. The mystery of Sarah's past had just deepened, and he didn't know what to do. All he knew was that something terrible was coming, and it was tied to the woman sitting in front of him. The past wasn't done with Sarah, and Jake knew that sooner or later, it would catch up with her. And when it did, he would have to decide just how far he was willing to go to protect her. The night was long, and the silence in the ranch house was heavy with tension. Sarah sat by the fire, still trembling, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if holding on to something that would help her keep it together. Jake sat across from her, his mind spinning with everything he had just learned. The blood-stained bandana still lay on the table between them, a haunting reminder of the past she was trying so hard to escape. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Jake didn't know what to say. He had never been one for many words, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him. Sarah's fear was palpable, and every time he tried to make sense of the situation, the puzzle pieces seemed to fit together only to fall apart. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah broke the silence. I never wanted this life, she said quietly, her voice shaky. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But sometimes, life doesn't give you a choice. Jake watched her, his eyes softening as he saw the pain behind her words. He could see it now more than ever. This wasn't just a woman running from a past she couldn't control. This was someone who had lived through things no one should have to. Tell me everything, Jake said, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to hold anything back. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to find the strength to speak. I grew up in a small town far from here. My family was poor, but we were happy. I was just a girl when I met him. His name was Thomas. He was charming, strong, and I thought he loved me. I thought he was everything I wanted. Her voice cracked for a moment, and she paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. But it wasn't long before I realized who he really was. Thomas wasn't just a man. He was the leader of a gang, a group of outlaws who terrorized the area. He was violent, controlling, and nothing like the man I had thought I knew. She wiped away a tear, trying to push through the flood of painful memories. I tried to leave him, but he wouldn't let me. He'd find me no matter where I went. His men. They were always watching. I couldn't escape. Jake listened in silence, his fists clenching slightly as she spoke. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, trapped in a life of fear and violence. The Sarah he had seen, the woman who cooked his meals and cleaned his home, was a far cry from the woman she described. When I realized I couldn't run anymore, I knew I had to fight back, she continued, her voice low but determined. One night Thomas came home drunk and he attacked me. I had no choice. I grabbed a knife and I fought back. She paused, her eyes filled with shame. I didn't want to kill him, but I had no other choice. I had to survive. Jake felt his heart drop. He could hear the pain in her voice, and he could see the torment in her eyes. She wasn't proud of what she had done. She was ashamed of it. But Jake understood that sometimes survival meant making impossible choices. I ran after that. I knew he wouldn't stop coming for me. So I ran from town to town, changing my name each time, hoping no one would find me. But even when I thought I was safe, the fear never left me. It was always there in the back of my mind, waiting for the day he would find me. She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the edges of the blood-stained bandana. When I found this place, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally be free. But now I realize I was wrong. Jake sat in stunned silence, his mind racing as he tried to process everything Sarah had just shared. It made sense now, the fear, the distance, the tears. She had been running for so long, carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear. But despite all of this, Jake felt something stirring inside him, something he hadn't expected. Sympathy, yes, but also something deeper. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he knew he wanted to help her, to protect her from whatever came next. "You're not alone," he said softly, his voice steady. "You don't have to run anymore. This is your home now. No one will hurt you here." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But what about him? What about Thomas? He'll come for me, Jake. He'll never stop until he gets what he wants." Jake's jaw tightened. He could see the truth in her eyes. The man Sarah had described wasn't someone who would just let her go. He would come looking for her no matter what. "I won't let him get to you," Jake said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." That was when Sarah began to break down. It wasn't the kind of breakdown you would expect. There was no dramatic sobbing or outbursts. Instead, she simply collapsed in Jake's arms, tears flowing freely as she let go of all the fear, all the pain, and all the years of running. She had never truly allowed herself to feel safe, and now, in this moment, she was letting herself feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. Jake held her for a long time, offering her comfort in the only way he knew how. He didn't say much, but his presence spoke volumes. And as the night wore on, Sarah's sobs slowed and the weight on her shoulders seemed to lessen, if only for a moment. But just as they thought they could breathe a little easier, something changed. It wasn't the kind of change you notice immediately. It was subtle at first, just a feeling in the air, a shift that Jake couldn't quite place. Then in the distance he heard it, a faint sound that sent a chill through his bones. The sound of horses' hooves, the feeling of dread washed over him like a cold wave. He knew what it meant. Sarah's past wasn't done with her, and it had come to find her. "We need to go," Jake said, his voice low but urgent. "Now!" Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the fear in his voice. "What is it?" "They're here," Jake replied. "The men she's been running from. We need to get out of here now." Sarah's face drained of color. "No, it can't be. He wouldn't—" But Jake was already moving, grabbing his rifle from the wall and loading it quickly. "Get your things," he ordered. "Hurry, we don't have much time." As the sound of hooves grew louder, Jake's heart raced. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for cattle or land. This was a fight for survival. And Jake wasn't about to let Sarah face her past alone. With Sarah at his side, they hurried out the back door of the ranch house, slipping into the dark night, hoping to find some place to hide before it was too late. But as they disappeared into the shadows, they both knew that the reckoning had come. And when it did, there would be no going back.